Hello to all our Chamois Butt'r ambassadors. I see a lot of familiar names. And hi to anyone who's joining us because maybe you saw our post on Instagram. We're excited to have you this evening. I'm going to give everyone probably 1 or 2 more minutes to join. And then I will introduce our presenter this evening. If you want, please feel free to put in the chat your name and where you're from too. We've got a good crew already here, so it'd be interesting. And while we wait, Tina, I have a few rapid fire questions for you.
Fantastic.
These are very, very serious questions, okay?
Excellent.
We debate them a lot at Chamois Butt'r. The first one being, do you prefer pancakes or waffles?
I gotta go waffles. Waffles.
Love it. Okay. Egg beaters or SPDs?
SPDs.
Okay. I actually was trying to look at this photo.
Yeah, you got a good image there. It's yeah.
Amazing. What is the most scenic place you've ever ridden your bike?
Gosh, there's been a lot. I feel really lucky. There's been a bunch. But this year I got to go up to Banff National Park in Canada, and that was pretty incredible. That had to be one of the most gorgeous places I've ever ridden. It blew my mind. The mountains, the lakes, the whole thing was spectacular. Highly recommend.
So cool. That is definitely a bucket list place for me. I've never been.
Yes, add it to your list if it's not on there.
Yeah. Okay, and then last but certainly not least, what is your favorite Chamois Butt'r product?
This is such a mean question, making me pick one. I'm a huge Chamois Butt'r fan. I pretty much like and use everything, but if I have to pick one, I'm gonna say the Chamois Butt'r Her. That's like my go-to in and out, day in and out kind of thing. So I want to go with that.
I love it. Amazing. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for saying hi in the chat. I love seeing your names and where you're from. We've got a great crew tonight and an incredible speaker. Tina Hart is here with us, and I am super excited. Tina's going to be talking about goal setting and sustainable training. And I don't know about anyone else, but now feels like the perfect time to talk about sustainable training because the weather forecast looks terrible, and I'm definitely feeling myself settling into like deep winter. So I'm kind of excited to maybe get a little bit more motivation tonight. Let me introduce Tina. So I have all of her accolades written here. Tina's pretty incredible. So Tina is based in Boulder, Colorado, and rides with the Ride or Die Collective. And she's also a coach with Basecamp Cycling. Tina has ridden her bike all over the world this year. It's pretty amazing. If you want to go look at her Instagram, that's also a good way to get inspired to ride and train. Every post is like a new place and a new race, and it's incredible. This year, Tina won the 2023 Colorado Cyclocross State Championships, Cat 3. Congratulations. And she also was the first place woman finisher in Gravel World's 300 long voyage. I know just from looking at her Instagram, I think I saw like Mallorca, you mentioned Canada, Emporia, Lincoln, Idaho, like you go all over the place. SBT, Colorado, Utah, so many. Ultra endurance rides in your race resume. And then I think one of the most interesting things I found out about you was when you did Unbound XL in 2022. It was a total of 352 miles, and your stop time was less than 2 hours.
Yes.
And I was like, I stopped for longer than that on a Saturday ride. Frank, you didn't have to laugh so loud. I'm just kidding. I don't care. So Tina's super cool, and I am gonna go ahead and let her take it away.
Thanks so much. That was a very kind introduction. Yeah, so we're just taking 15 minutes or so to talk about goals. We could take a week to talk about goals. So just to give a little bit of framing, my hope tonight is just that we have a little bit of a refresher on like, why do we bother to set goals? How do you set them? How to make it more likely that you're actually going to succeed when you set those goals? And then just a couple of my favorite tips that I think are helpful. And I'm going to come at this from the sports side of things, but you could apply this however you want. As Beckie said, my background, I was a multi-sport athlete and I'm mainly a cyclist now. So you'll hear that side of framing in this, but again, you can kind of apply this as it fits for you. So just to kind of kick it off, I wanted to back up a little bit before talking about, you know, what to set goals for and how to accomplish them and all this, and just go all the way back up to why bother to set goals. I think with the new year, especially, you get these extremes of folks either being like, I'm going to set all the goals, and they make like 16 lists and big dreams, and that's cool. And then on the flip side, you get the other side where folks are like, I don't do that. I don't set resolutions. I don't do goals. Forget all that. I'm just going to fail at them in 3 weeks anyway. Like, none of it. And so my encouragement would be to find a middle ground and to actually set some goals. I think they can be really helpful. And I put some of the reasons I think they're useful here. You know, they give us a way to prioritize time. If you know what your big goals are and you've got just, you know, a small handful, it's a way to direct your time when you're sort of like, oh, do I want to go to the movies or get on the bike? You know, you can kind of go back and think, right, like I have this big goal. Maybe my decision today is getting on the bike or whatever it is. They provide some direction. They help us to see the big picture. And I think that's interesting too, when you track kind of what your goals are over time, being able to see a little bit like what you're gravitating towards, it can be interesting. And they can also help us sustain momentum. So, you know, when you set that first goal and you're like, all right, I'm going to do this really big thing. I'm going to qualify for Boston. I'm going to do the 200 Unbound, you know, race. I'm going to, whatever it is. And your first couple of weeks, you're like, yeah, I'm super motivated. I'm super motivated. And then that motivation can kind of drift off. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to like set goals to keep that momentum going, especially our highs in Boulder this weekend are going to be single digits. So especially when it is cold and dark out. You want to go to the next slide. I also want to make a point too that like we often talk about, I think as athletes, we talk about types of goals as race goals, right? Like I want to top 10, I want a podium, I want to finish a race or a big event or whatnot. And so sometimes when folks are not doing a big event, you don't have a big race goal or whatever, you're like, oh, I don't need to set a goal because I don't, you know, that's not what I'm doing. I just want to be strong or whatever, this sort of vague idea of like kind of what you want to do. And so I would say race goals are great. I think it's, you know, most of us know how to set, you know, it's pretty clear. Like I want to do X, Y, or Z. I want to finish this big event, whatever that is. But there's lots of other ways to think about goals. In some cases, it might be around consistency, like, you know, doing X, Y, or Z, whether it's your strength training regime or your, you know, how many times you're on the bike or whatever it is, like putting some consistency into your routine. It could be something around nutrition. It could be something around your strength workouts themselves. It could even be how your time is spent. You know, maybe it's that you want to be out in nature more, or you are tending to do workouts solo and you're like, gosh, I really need to do more group runs or group rides, or vice versa. You're like, you're all group runs and rides. You're like, gosh, I maybe should do some solo reflection time or whatever it is. So,
Oh,
but
Sarah,
just say like, when
you know
you
what
think
Sarah
about
said? It
goals,
was,
you can be broad. So yeah, next slide. For this too, I talk about goals in two ways. People use different terms. I'm going to use the term sort of your big outcome goal and then process goals. Lots of different words here. But I think about these in two ways. And I pulled this image on the right from an organization called The New Happy. They use art to teach the happiness of science. I can't actually say it, like I'm not a huge, I don't follow them very closely, but I saw this image last week and I was like, this image, like it's better than what I can do. So I grabbed it. And And that big red square, like that's the big scary goal. That's the big sort of the thing that like you're kind of thinking about, thinking like, could I do that? Am I capable of doing that? And not that all your goals have to be these huge, big, extravagant things. But I think oftentimes we stop and think like, I really want to do this, but like, I don't know if I can do it, or it seems too hard, or like other people can do that, but I'm not sure I can. And I would encourage you, it's funny, this has come up a few times today. I would encourage you to lean into some of those goals and be like, okay, like what would it look like for me to commit to something like that? And like pop that up. Because I think what tends to happen is the thing we get stuck on is we pop up that big goal. We're like, all right, I'm committing to the big thing. And then we stop there. And so kind of like I was saying previously, you get your first 2 weeks going, you're like motivated, you're committed. And then the 5 a.m. wake ups, you know, you're like, I'm getting up at 5 a.m., I'm getting the workout in. And then after a couple of weeks, like the 5 a.m. alarm goes off and you're like, you know, maybe your big goal's in June and you're like, June's really far away. It's January. And then, you know, February, March rolls around and you're like kind of committed, but then this other thing comes up or your friends are doing something and whatever. And then like all of a sudden it's the end of April and your goal's June 1 and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I got 4 weeks. And I think that's where we get into trouble. And so my encouragement is set the big scary goal, like go for it, commit to it, tell a bunch of people about it, and then break it down. That's what I like about this little picture. Like take that big goal and break it into smaller chunks, and then break those smaller chunks into even smaller chunks and start there. Start with those progress goals and figure out, okay, if I want to do X, that's cool. I can put that up on my wall, but like, how do I get from where I am today to that big goal? And those are the pieces that are most important for us to figure out. We want to go to the next slide. The way that we do that, and I know this acronym probably isn't going to be surprising for anyone, but the way that I still like to think about it is setting those SMART goals. And so I want to take a moment and dig into this for a minute. So, because again, I think this is where we get tripped up. We're like, oh, I have it, you know, I'm gonna eat better, I'm gonna work out more, I'm going to like add some strength into my routine, whatever. And then we just move on. And I would encourage you, I know it sounds silly and some folks are like, oh no, I don't need to like do this whole process, but I would actually encourage you, especially if you have that big scary goal that you're not sure you can do, to actually walk through this process. So SMART goal, the way that I do this acronym, and I actually do it a little differently than a lot of people, is one, is your goal simple? Like, is it easy to understand? Your goal should be pretty straightforward. If you need to like take 15 minutes and show me a bunch of like photos and a graph and an Excel sheet, like we are too complicated. That is too many goals in one. So, you know, be able to tell me your goal in 1 or 2 sentences. Like keep it simple. If you've got more than that, you've probably got multiple goals. Take another closer look at it and see if you can tease that out. Figure out what is that one sort of North Star that you're looking for. Second piece to me is meaningful. This is the M, and I do this a little differently than some folks. I think some folks do it measurable, but I do meaningful because I think this is really important. You have to know why your goal matters. That's what's going to be the thing that keeps you rolling. So if your goal is set because someone else thinks it's good for you, or someone else thinks it's something you should go for, that's not going to work really great. It might work for a little bit, but at some point, things are going to get hard inevitably in this journey, right? Because if it was easy, you probably already would have done it. It wouldn't be a goal. So make sure the goal matters to you. And it doesn't have to be fancy. Like I had someone, and this is a non-sport example, but someone talking about a goal, their goal is to take out the trash every Sunday night. And you might be like, that is not meaningful. But the reason it was is because it had been this issue between this person and their partner, and it was impacting their relationship. And so for them, literally taking out the trash on a weekly basis and making that a goal for them was impacting their relationship. And so it was important to that person. And so make sure whatever it is, how big or small or mundane, that it's meaningful to you. Third piece, actionable. So is it possible for you to take action to get to this goal? And so for this, I'm thinking like, okay, if you say, hey, I want to eat vegetarian every night of the week for dinner, that's what I'm going to go for. But if you have a partner that cooks 3 nights a week and they are not on board with your goal, they don't have that goal, then this becomes a little bit harder. Like, are you suddenly then doing a totally different dinner? Like, what does that look like for you? And so when you look at your goal, make sure that the things that will allow you to get to that goal are things that you control. So maybe if you make dinner 3 nights a week, your goal is to eat vegetarian 3 nights a week, or, maybe there's something else in there, but just thinking about like, can my actions influence this? They are realistic. Is it doable with the resources you have? So like, I could say I want to be an Olympic rower, but I have like, that is so, and I want to qualify for the Olympics, in 3 years. That is not a realistic, it's not a realistic thing for me for so many reasons. And I know that's an extreme example, but just like thinking about, is this something you could actually achieve? And I think if you don't know the answer to that question, that's okay. Like I said, the scary goal that you're not 100% sure about, that's okay. But when you look at those process goals, that's what's going to help you figure out if your goal is possible. So if you start breaking down those process goals and thinking like, okay, I want to ride my bike 200 miles on June 1st, it's January 10th. All right, I can ride my bike 50 miles right now. How do I get from here to there? Okay, well, if I add 10 miles every, X number of weeks, and, that seems pretty sustainable, I'm going to be able to get to that, you sort of look and map out that journey, make sure that's possible. And resources could also be time. It could be money. It could be lots of different things. So like if you're about to take a big promotion at a job, maybe the time is going to be tricky for you. And the last piece, trackable. This is obvious, but I think it gets missed a lot. Like, it needs to be measurable. It needs to be something you can track. And you need to know that, you have a way to complete it. Is there a way, how do you check it off? At the end of the day, like, can you say, yes, I achieved it, or no, I didn't? And that's for the big goal and those process goals. And this isn't necessarily a judgment. Like, there's lots of reasons you might not achieve it. But in order to know, is what I'm doing working, and to learn and figure out, like, do I need to adjust next time? You have to know if you did it. And so you have to know how to, say, yes, check, I got that, or no, I didn't. And so you need to be able to say like, all right, I have specifics lined up for this. It's the difference between saying like, I want to work out more versus I'm going to complete 90% of my workouts in my training plan in the month of January, right? Like, you get to January 31st, you look back, you're like, did that? Or like, nope, sure didn't. So that's how I think about setting goals, and like kind of helping to make sure that they're goals that that are gonna matter and be useful. I think I have one more slide on this. So okay, sort of top 4 tips on thinking about all of these pieces. So one, and probably the biggest one, is I would encourage you to limit those process goals and your big goals at the end of the day, right? Like, we can only have so many big goals, but limit them. You want them to be impactful. And so if you have this big goal, like, we'll go back that June 1st, 200 miles, you could probably set 50 process goals along the way, like all sorts of things could impact that. But I would encourage you to think, what are 2 to 4 things I can do that will have the most impact on that big goal that I have? What are the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 things that matter the most, right? Like, riding my bike more, that might be a big one. Eating more kale, like, sure, maybe, but like, that might not be the most impactful thing. You only control you. So I love when I hear my athletes, I do it myself, say like, I want a podium, or I want to win X, Y, or Z thing. Awesome. But I just want to remind myself, everyone, you only control you. And so, you can do all of these things to put the odds in your favor. You can train, you can eat well, you can like do all the mechanical work, sleep, recovery, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, like, if you're thinking of an event-based or race-based goal, things like that, where other people factor in, the best you can do is set up the odds for you. So do that. Set up the odds for yourself as best you can. And just remember, you aren't controlling anyone else's training or how they're going to come out and perform, or maybe a piece of bad luck or things like that. Like, the best you can do is to put the odds in your favor. Last 2, it's okay to revise things. Sometimes life goes off the rails. And I'm not saying like, 1 or 2 little things, you're like, oh, nope, my goal is done, like, this one small thing happened and I should revise the whole goal. But sometimes things come up unexpectedly. You get sick for a significant amount of time. Something changes at work, something happens in your family, like all sorts of things go wrong or change or just look different, you move, whatever it is. And so I would just encourage you, like, if you're trying and you're just like, you're not meeting things, instead of kind of banging your head against the wall, like give yourself some grace. And my favorite way to look at it is like, step back and think, okay, if this was going on with someone else, what would I tell them, right? Like, we can be really mean to ourselves. It's like, oh, you're a failure. Like, you're not doing it. You know, you suck. And like, would you ever say that to someone else? Probably not. You know, so like, think about like if your best friend came to you and they were like, well, these life things happen and I'm really stressed and my goal is this, like, think about what would you say to them? How would you help them revise? Like, give yourself that grace. And then my last tip would be write it down. And I know for some folks, they'll love it. Like, you have a journal, you write all sorts of things down. I've got friends who have all sorts of cool paper and stationery and pens and whatnot. But I know for other people, and sometimes for myself, I'm like, it's in my head. I got it. I know it. But I would encourage you to actually take the few minutes and sit and give yourself maybe 15 minutes of space, some music, some tea, I don't know, whatever, beer, whatever floats your boat, and actually write down the goal. And it can make the scary goals real. It can make the process goals clearer. It can really set it up. And then I like to take what I write down and stick it up somewhere. And so I see it and revisit, and it doesn't just sort of like peter off and they're like, oh, did I say I was going to do that 3 times or 4 times? Or I don't know, I'm sure it's fine. Like, you've got something written down that you've committed to, and that helps it make it a little more real. So that's my 15-minute sort of quick ways of thinking about goal setting and thinking about like how you keep that momentum through the winter as you think about sort of big spring, summer, fall, 2024, 2025 goals.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tina. At this time, we'll open it up for questions. If folks have questions for Tina, now would be the time to ask. I have a question if no one else has a question. My question is, Tina, do you tell your goals to anyone? Because I've heard, like, I know some people post their goals on Instagram, some people keep their goals secret, some people have an accountability friend. What works for you?
I do. And I always find when they're really big goals, especially the goals I don't know that I can do, that it's kind of scary. And I was just talking about that with a friend of mine, and we were doing a workout today, and he was saying the same thing. He's like, I think I need to start telling people my goal, but I think it feels scary. And I think it's mostly because, one, you're saying it out loud, so it feels kind of real. Like, when it's in your head, a lot of times you're thinking, well, no, it's, it's my goal, but if I don't do it, it's fine. Like, you can kind of cheat yourself a little bit. And I think when you start saying it out loud, you tell someone else, it makes it a little more real. Someone else knows now. And it's not that, they're necessarily gonna, get on you if you don't meet it. But it's kind of out in the world. And so I do tell people my goals. And I encourage other people to as well. And I also remind folks, sometimes it's scary because you think like, what if I tell people and then I can't, or I fail, or I don't do it? And that's kind of scary. But I would also say, like, we sometimes, assume that people are paying more attention to us than they actually are. And, when you see someone else not make a goal, your first thought probably isn't, wow, that person's a huge failure, right? So like, I would encourage you to tell people, let people help you. Build a community of people that are going to support you and that you can lean on those bad days when you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Or like, why am I doing this? Build that community of folks that can help you through it.
That's awesome. Someone asked in the chat, how often do you go back to your goals and readjust or add new ones?
Yeah, I like to so thinking about from the athlete side of things, I am on a kind of traditional season where I do most of my racing and events in the spring, summer, and fall. And so I like to use the winter to kind of reflect on my season and set some goals for the next season. But again, too, sometimes, the spring shakes out differently than I planned. And so maybe I might adjust a fall goal. I actually try not to make my fall goals too set in stone, typically. I like to give myself a little flexibility there and kind of let things play out a little bit. So I like to plan, I plan a lot of my big goals sort of 6 months, 9 months in advance. But I know folks that do better, you know, thinking a couple years out, like if you've got a really big goal, folks who are trying to, you know, if you're trying to do something really huge, planning more than a year out is totally fine, as long as you can break those down into small buckets. Same with sort of shorter distance things. And my process goals tend to be anywhere from usually like a month to 3 month kind of chunks so that I can keep it manageable.
That's awesome. Someone asked, how do you do after coming short of a goal?
Yeah. I think for me, one thing that I appreciate about having the process goals is that I can look back and figure out, like, so right, first I think I have a reaction that's usually pretty typical, which is I'm usually bummed, right? Like I wanted to go do a big thing and it doesn't happen, and that's like that doesn't feel great. And then hopefully after like I give myself sort of 24 or 48 hours to be bummed about it. And then I start going back and looking and thinking like, okay, did I set myself up for this really well? Like, why didn't I meet this? Was it that my process goals, you know, weren't the right ones? I thought these 3 things were going to be really impactful and they weren't. Was it that I had some bad luck? You know, I got sick right before something I was, you know, going for like for an event, something that came up with a family, whatever it is. I try to figure out what went wrong and you know, reframe it a little bit to think like, right, that was, you know, it's really a failure. I didn't meet it, but like, how can I use that to then either retry it or use that learning to go at something similar in a different way? And so I really try, I didn't used to do this and I do now. I try to go back and actually write down sort of a couple of things that I have learned, when good or bad, when I complete or don't complete, and think like, what can I do next time to make this even better, whether I nailed the goal or not. So but I do give myself the sort of day or two to just be sad about it, if it was a big thing.
Okay, we've got another question. How do you reconnect to your joy for cycling when you become focused on the challenges or goals and meeting or sometimes not meeting your goals?
Yeah, I think part of it for me is thinking about going back to the why and the meaningful part. So it can be really, and I think about this a lot, like if you're setting event-based goals, race-based goals, even nutrition or strength goals, things like that, it'd be really easy to just get caught up in the numbers or like, did I win or not win, or, you know, whatever that is. And I think going back to like, why does this matter to me? Why am I doing this? That's the thing that I think is important to me. And so I think that's why the meaningful piece, that's why my M in SMART is meaningful, because knowing why I'm getting up and doing it, like to win is, or to do well or whatever, if it's a race, you know, that's cool, but why else? Like, is it that I want to push myself to do something new? Is it I want to spend more time with people I care about? Is it I want to try something I've never, you know, that I've never done before? Whatever it is, like going back to the why, I think is really key there for me.
Amazing. All righty. Any other questions for Tina? These are amazing. Frank?
Tina, how do you deal with, so we talked about you're getting a goal and sometimes you don't achieve them and you look back at the breakdown reason. Say, for this race, I know I need to be able to lose 15 pounds and you only lose 10. You can look back and see like, oh, all right, well, I could have done this, this, and this better. How do you deal with it when it's a setback that's out of your control, an injury, a financial situation, it's something like that? The car breaks down and now I can't get to Unbound. Like now you're just like, your mind is just kind of, you were so focused on it and now you can't. And you have to reset. Do you rewrite all the goals? Do you adjust them? And that's something I've struggled with. And so I'm curious what you would do.
Yeah, I think that's so hard, especially when it's outside of your control. In some ways, it feels worse because you're thinking like, right, I did everything right, and X, Y, or Z happened. And I think that can be pretty gutting. And so again, I think like letting yourself be bummed about that is important, not just brushing right past that phase. I think it's actually useful. And then to me, it kind of depends a little. If it's, you know, right, like, so if my goal is Unbound and my car breaks down, I can't even get there. I don't even get to start, or like I get sick, right? Like I've got a fever, I can't get to the start line. Then I try to think about, okay, maybe I got 2/3 of the way, or in that case, like 98% of the way to that goal. Is there something else I can do with this? In this case, like say this fitness, is there another event in 2 weeks that I could pop into that I wasn't even planning on, that I can kind of like get after in a different way? Like, can I sign up for something that I wasn't even thinking about, and use everything I've done to sort of get to that? Same thing with like, maybe I got halfway towards something, and again, we'll take the Unbound example. Like maybe I got sick or I got injured, right? And I'm off the bike for 2 months. I broke my collarbone, whatever it is. Okay, maybe Unbound 200 is out, but maybe Unbound 100 is in, or maybe it's the 50-mile, and I'm going to race for a podium age group instead of just trying to finish the 200. So I usually try to think about like, can I revise and take everything I've done and still do something with it? Can I just go out next weekend in my like town of Boulder and ride 200 miles on my own, and put together my own cool route, and like have some friends aid station me and like make my own adventure of it? Like how can I like keep that momentum going in some way? So I think it looks different in different cases, but that's the way I try to approach it.
Awesome. All right, we've got one more, and I think this will probably be our last question for the night. But Tina, what is your next big goal?
It's a great question. I saw that, Sarah. I have a few coming up. I think, oh gosh, my next one, I guess, actually, we've got a local Colorado gravel race in about a month here called Old Man Winter. And so I have a goal of actually kind of training and preparing to race my best at that. And I do have a goal of trying to podium for it. My process goals are getting me set up to sort of put the odds in my favor, knowing that like I don't know what other people will show up. It's February. It could be snowing. There's like so many things that can go wrong, but I'm going for it. So yeah, that's coming up in a month.
Amazing. Well, Tina, thank you so much. This has been amazing. And thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. We really appreciate you joining. I do want to invite you all back for virtual bike club meetup in February. It's going to be on February 7th. It's always the first Wednesday of the month, except in January. At 6:30 p.m. Central Time, we are going to have Kate, Susan, and Sally from Grounded Nebraska, and they're going to be presenting on the ethos of their event, which is called Grounded Nebraska. If you don't know these women who also call themselves the moms of gravel, their ethos is like so grounded in community, and what they create in Nebraska is like pretty incredible. Even if you just go look at the Grounded Nebraska social media, it's very like, it's like watching adults at summer camp. And I know Kate is like very intentional and just really like cares about every single person who comes to their event. So they're going to be sharing about that on February 7th. So please, we would love it if you go ahead and put that on your calendar and join us again. Watch our social media. We post the Zoom link and it should be a great one.